everybody that's not here yet, but, so yeah, just kind of getting going here. So, if you're watching this later, thanks for watching. I'm just wanting to kind of press on in this book, because I actually have tonight free, and my schedule coming up is going to be kind of packed, so I won't be able to get any reading done in the near future. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. So just going to get on cracking. So I'm reading, we are currently in the Enola Holmes series, Case of the Bizarre Bouquets, which is book 3 in the series. Oh, hi, Tara. Welcome. Thanks for being here. And also thank you, Heartless Shroom and Riddy, for the host. So we're just starting, we're almost quite literally like halfway through the book. This is The Case of the Bizarre Bouquets, brought to you by the Lorain Public Library in Lorain, Ohio. Of course, I had to wash the shame off me, but I did it in good time. Oh. I don't know what you're talking about. Wash the shame off you. Well, you look squeaky clean to me, so. Oh, hey, Riddy. Thanks for being here. So, yeah, I was just saying I just wanted to get cracking. Get cracking on this book, because I'm free tonight, and I might not be free for quite a while, especially next week. School starts back for me next week. So I'm just going to get going and start reading, and I'm going to try and finish today. So that's my, my goal for this evening, is to get through the rest of this book. So sad. No more fancy hats. That's sad. I'm sorry. So, anyway, so I'm going to keep on going. And, yeah, I know, I have that emote too, and I have no idea, like, where it came from or why I have it. It's just kind of odd. I literally have no idea why I have a little purple, happy soccer ball. So, but yeah. So anyways, without further ado, I feel like I have a lot of headspace up there, so I'm going to bring you down a little bit. Just because I feel like you've got a lot of... I know, it's probably going to mess up the camera angle for all my other streams now, so. It's from Cheers in a Stream. If someone cheered enough, it would have been gifted to random people in the chat. Oh, okay. Was that like during the World Cup? Is that when... That's why it's a soccer ball? It's like during the World Cup or something? Maybe. Alrighty, so, I'm gonna get on cracking. Chapter the 10th. It is much to the credit of the platter-faced proprietress that she did not gawk or exclaim as I entered Perteletes. She only gazed, and murmured, "My goodness, good Evans, and you carry it off splendidly. My congratulations, Miss, Everso." So she recognized the wig and the birthmark, remembered my unprepossessing appearance at the time of our transactions, and even recalled the name she had imprinted upon my calling cards. "Thank you," I smiled. She knew as well as I did that the name I used was not my own, just as I was not what I appeared to be. But I heard nothing mocking, condescending, or sly in her voice. Hers was a warm sort of discretion. One might even say motherly. As if Mum ever mothered me. Do not think about Mum. How may I help you today? With some difficulty, I disciplined my thoughts to attend to my business, which was to question Pertellity without appearing to do so. Therefore I had to pretend to be in her shop for some other purpose. "The Spanish papers," I murmured. "I find them rather awkward. Have you anything else?" "Of course. This way." She led me to a back alcove, screened off from the rest of the shop, where she revealed to me a number of remarkable substances, liquid, paste, and powdered, that could be discreetly used to enhance one's eyes. Eye drops to increase brilliance, eyelash augmentation to obviate the need for tasteless fakery, eyelid and eyebrow glosses, shadows, and pastel coloring. The secret, explained Pertellity, is to use just a hint. One's advantage is spoilt if one's and is detected. Seated on a divine little lace-skirted dressing chair at a well-lighted mirror, dabbing miracle-working unguents onto my face as she directed me, I exclaimed, "Fascinating." "Quite so. Are these materials used in the theater?" "No, these are too subtle for the stage. These are rather recondite wow. SAT words, guys. Emollients, Miss Everso. One might find them hidden in the dressing table drawers of countesses, duchesses, and even queens. Merest can't, of course, yet I found myself half believing her. Greatly impressed, I looked up at her plain, large-featured face flanked by buns of gray hair. "I feel honored. But however did you come to discover these?" "Why, in the business way." "But how came you into this sort of business?" "One who is ugly beyond hope, dealing in the secrets of beauty, you mean?" She uttered these shockingly frank words with a smile in which I saw not the slightest trace of bitterness, only amusement. It is ironic, is it not? Her extraordinary honesty both delighted and perplexed me. "That is not how I meant at all," I told her sincerely. "How does a woman come to undertake such a queer sort of shop as this?" I noticed that, oddly, for such a forthright person, she hesitated slightly before telling me. "Oh, well, it was my husband's at first, you see." "Ah, Chanticleer was your husband?" Chanticleer could not by any stretch of fancy have been his real name, of course. I suppose that is why she smiled rather oddly. I extrapolated further. "And was he an actor or some such, that he entered into merchandising of this sort?" "No, not at all." She seemed less and less inclined to answer my questions. "But has he now, passed away?" In the natural order of things, she would have taken over the shop because she was widowed. "No, he's retired." Her tone attempted to put an end to my curiosity, but I refused to be quelled. "Truly? How delightful for him," I prattled. "How does he spend his time now?" "Oh, in his precious house." The answer shot out of her in such a harsh tone one would have thought he killed puppies for a pastime. Hothouse. I had come here intending somehow to find out whether she had any male customers who required false noses, but had found out instead that she had a husband who, perhaps, cultivated rather nasty flowers. "You dislike the hothouse?" I inquired meekly. "I dislike the husband," she answered, grimly, yet with such a disarming candor that we both laughed. Then she changed the subject. "Would you like to see the latest emollients to enhance the lips, Miss Everso?" In order to placate her, I applied some rosy color to my mouth, after which I selected amongst the recondite emollients she had showed me, making a purchase generous enough, I hoped, to make her think kindly of me. Once the items were done up in a brown paper parcel, I placed it in my string shopping bag, then hesitated in Pertellity's doorway at the moment of departure. It seemed to me that, having failed to work the conversation around to my objective, I must be direct, and that I must ask now or never. "I wonder," I started in a by-the-by sort of way, "did you ever have occasion, Mrs. My pause inquired her name. "Kippersalt," she said rather reluctantly. "Ah, Mrs. Kippersalt. Have you ever had the occasion to provide false ears, perhaps, or fingers, for people who have lost their own?" She started to nod and declare with some pride, "Why, certainly." But I had not yet finished speaking. "Or a false nose, perhaps?" Her nodding abruptly ceased, and her tone of voice turned sharp. "Why do you ask?" "An acquaintance of mine had a most interesting, if somewhat discomfiting, encounter with a man whose false nose came off," I said. "I just wondered—" She burst out. "What's he done now?" "Interesting. Who?" I demanded. "Never mind." Her usual smile had turned into a scowl, and suddenly, conscious of her big-boned size and strength, I needed to discipline myself not to step away from her. All that was motherly about her had transformed to menace. "What you're pryin' for?" she demanded, her accent more cockney by the moment, her fists on her ample hips as she glowered at me. "Who are you?" "Now you know my name, what's yours?" Then, when I did not reply, "I don't want your business. Get out and don't come here again." I did not linger to argue the point, but left with the most lively curiosity capering in my mind. I had, after all, come to Pertellity. Mrs. Kippersalt, I reminded myself. Kippersalt. I must remember that name. I had come only to see whether it was possible for a man with a missing nose to wear a rubber one, and if so, did she know of any instances? Well, it would certainly appear that she did, painfully so, and more so than she desired anyone to know. But what should I do about this? Making my way down Holywell Street, I quite wanted to stop and sit somewhere to think, perhaps on paper, but I could not pause. Indeed, I hastened my pace, for despite my mental abstraction, I had noticed quite a majority of masculine heads turning as I passed. Numerous unsolicited greetings from the gents loitering around the print shops, and a male pest following me. No, 2 of them. What in the name of heaven? Then I realized I was still wearing the lip color and various tints, shadows, glosses, eyelash amplifier, etc. that I had put on in Pertellity's hidden alcove. Oh dear. Men were such simpletons. The more artifice, the more they... Such imbeciles, to be enchanted by a wig, some padding, and a little paint. Had I rendered myself a bit too ravishing? At last I reached the more spacious pavements of the Strand. Hurrying away from Holywell Street, searching for some place of refuge, I heard the familiar call of a boy with newspapers to sell. "Piper! Piper!" in a Cockney accent. Striding to where he stood, I flipped my penny into his waiting cap and took a newspaper, which I opened at once, standing where I was, simply to hide behind. Having done so, by an effort of will, I calmed my own breathing. As was my usual remedy in trying moments, I envisioned my mother's face and brought to her mind her oft-repeated words to me. "Enola, you will do quite well on your own." But rather than settling me, the thought of Mum made my heart lurch. For that message, "Ivy, desire mistletoe, where, when, love your chrysanthemum." I had not yet replied. Had it come from her, or had it not? Too many problems. What to do about Mum? What to do about the strange behavior of Mrs. Kippersalt? What to do about the missing Dr. Watson? Scanning the agony columns of the newspaper I held, I looked for an answer to Hawthorne, convolvulus, asparagus, and poppies, and without much satisfaction I found it. M.M.W. Deadly Nightshade. Thank you. Not at all helpful, only frightening. The deadly nightshade, an attractive wildflower whose berries were poisonous while not to be found in any of the usual lexicons of the meaning of bouquets, possessed a clear enough threat by its name. The mocking insertion of "U," symbol of graveyards, made it even clearer, a death threat towards presumably poor Dr. Watson. Good heavens, I had to do something, but what? Immobile behind my shielding newspaper, I stood trying to think, but found it almost impossible to formulate any rational plan when, out of the corners of my eyes, I glimpsed masculine forms lingering nearby, ogling me, and I knew they intended to follow me, although I still found it difficult to believe what fools the generality of men were. But experience forced me to conclude that the sight of a pretty woman turned most of them into jackasses. Why, look at how the male clerks in the newspaper offices had changed their manner towards me when A most illuminating thought opened my eyes wide. Male clerks. Newspaper offices. Chancy, for I lacked experience in the feminine art of flirtation, but certainly worth a try. I had nothing to lose by attempt. Folding my newspaper and thrusting it into my string bag along with the parcel, I strode to the nearest cab stand, ignoring the pests trailing me. Selecting a four-wheeler in which to conceal myself, I told the driver, Fleet Street. That's the end of chapter 10. Well, hello! Heartless, welcome! The Salty Kipper. Yes, like some Scottish accent. Do you feel like you're missing something still? I'm sorry. Thanks for joining, Heartless. I appreciate you being here. Yeah, I was just gonna tell you the message said this. Just going to send you this so you could understand a little bit of the... There we go. So, it's thank you with the tree as you. Claps louder because is clearly a completion now. Yeah, it's officially finished chapter 10. Oh, goodness. Yeah, so that's why she mentioned the yew tree being as like a tree in graveyards. So, but yeah, this is a pretty clever pun. This author of this note is actually pretty dang clever if you're, into tree puns. So, alrighty. We're just gonna keep on pressing. My OBS is telling me that the sound from my voice is kind of loud. So if it sounds like I'm yelling at you, or if it's like kind of overmodulating the mic or something, please let me know. I don't typically like watch my streams back except to log the times of each chapter in my YouTube videos. So if for some reason, if sound or anything is like wonky, please feel free to let me know. Just as a general rule of thumb, since you guys you watch my streams quite a bit. So, anyways, that being said, business out of the way. Chapter the 11th. En route, I set my plans in order in my mind. The object of my sortie was twofold: to learn of a description, if not the actual identity, of the person who had placed Deadly Nightshade, thank you, but also to try and find out whether it had indeed been my mum who had sent the message, Desire Mistletoe, to me. I decided I must first address the matter of the bizarre bouquets first, for Dr. Watson's life might well be at stake. Secondarily, I admitted to another selfish reason. Assuming that Deadly Nightshade, thank you, had been placed in all the newspapers, I would have several moments to try out my plan. But 422-555, 415, 144-423-451, etc., Ivy Desire Mistletoe, having appeared only in the Pall Mall Gazette, I must know what I was doing by the time I got there. In the privacy of the cab, I extracted scissors from my bust in order to clip today's message from the newspaper before discarding the latter. Then at the busiest corner of Fleet Street, for I did not wish to be noticed, I rapped on the roof of the cab to bid the driver to stop. After paying my fare, I walked a few steps to the nearest newspaper office. It happened to be the Daily Telegraph, and approached the desk where a young man of the gent persuasion was diddling with pen and blotter. "Excuse me," I lisped in the wispiest voice I could manage. He glanced up quite indifferently, but upon taking in my pulchritude of person, it's another SAT word, guys, he straightened to attention like a bird dog on point, cooing, "Would you happen to remember who placed this personal advertisement?" I showed him my clipping. With difficulty he managed to read it and ogle me at the same time. "Deadly Nightshade, thank you. Ah, yes, that is an odd one. I seem to recall—" "We do not give out such information," interrupted quite a starchy female voice. I glanced up to find an older woman in, also starchy, bombazine, obviously a supervisor, standing by. She glowered down upon the young fellow at the desk, but drifted her remarks towards me, scolding as if I were a schoolchild. "If you were to place a personal advertisement, you would not desire to have your identity disclosed now, would you?" Taking my clipping back from the hapless clerk, I turned and exited with such dignity as I could muster. So much for the Daily Telegraph. I proceeded toward the next newspaper office. Quite a long day ensued. I will spare the gentle reader a full account of my rebuffs and near triumphs, other than to say that, in general, males welcomed me and females did not. Very much the opposite. I did manage to obtain a little information when males, but not females, were present. In 2 instances, young men, I cannot say gentlemen, as they implied that I owed them a certain familiarity in return. Indeed, I felt much mortified as I wheedled information out of them, but putting aside my maidenly revulsion, I found reason for satisfaction. Their accounts tallied. The Deadly Nightshade advertisement, they both said, had been placed by a most peculiar man with a grey goatee, wearing a top hat, although he seemed not to be upper class, evidently trying to make himself appear taller, for he was slight of height, stark-boned, and altogether rather repulsive. Pressed as to what exactly, other than his lack of stature, caused this impression, they replied that he looked odd. "Cadaverous," said one. "Like a leper," said the other. Asked how so, he seemed rather at a loss, but explained that there was something odd about the man's face. "Kind of like a dummy made of wax, if you've ever seen any such." It seemed to me that they might very well be depicting, quote, "just a long-faced tove in chin whiskers and top hat, exceptin' he took his nose off," as a much perturbed street urchin had once told me. a man with a false nose glued on, the juncture disguised with face putty. Such artifice might give his features a subtly disturbing tone, texture, and rigidity. Given what I had learned, I felt it safe to surmise that the sender of the bizarre bouquets had indeed answered my advertisement. And while gratified to verify his existence, I was worried. How to find this most interesting individual? I had no idea. Except that Bertellity, Mrs. Kippersalt, might know something of him, having reacted so oddly to my questions. What's he done now? And having then angrily banned me from her shop. I quite wanted to know where the Kippersalts lived, and to see whether Mr. Kippersalt cultivated hawthorn in his hothouse. Indeed, I much desired to look at Mr. Kippersalt himself, to see whether his face seemed long, leprous, cadaverous, waxen, etc. Might I find him by following Mrs. Kippersalt home after her work? Not tenable, I decided after brief consideration. At this time of year, darkness had not yet fallen when the shops were closed, and if Mrs. Kippersalt were to catch sight of me, no matter how I dressed, she would recognize me, having seen me in so many guises already. Also, I had no desire to repeat the adventure of shadowing someone. The last time, walking in the street to avoid the lamplight of pavements, I had nearly been flattened by a Clydesdale pulling a lumber wagon. No, I indeed needed to find Mr. Kippersalt by other means. Kippersalt. Not a common surname, and locating his place of residence should have been simple enough were London run like a sensible city. But it was not. Indeed, the world's largest metropolis was also the world's worst governed. London was organized, or more properly, disorganized, into more than 200 boroughs, each with its own records keeper, tax collector, constables, etc. However, hypothesizing that the Kippersalts lived not far from their shop, as was most often the case with older people engaged in commerce that had been established before the underground had begun to whisk workers from the outskirts of London into the city. If the Kippersalts lived on Holywell Street or not far away, I might visit only 2 or 3 borough offices before I obtained some information. As these thoughts occupied my mind, my footsteps took me back down Fleet Street towards the one newspaper office I had not yet visited, that of the Pall Mall Gazette. Just as I entered, my heart sank, for I saw that a stiff and spinsterly woman sat behind the desk. Just the same, I had to try. On the window ledge lay copies of the paper for the last several days. With my foolish heart pounding beneath the dagger concealed in my dress front, I located the one I needed, opening it to find amongst the personal advertisements 422-555-4151-444-23451, 3342-44454, 235-154-5351, 353251-3451, 353-251-43, 235-32-551, 555-31534, 313234, 554411, 435-4325, 1331533. Ivy, desire mistletoe. Wear, win, love your chrysanthemum. Pointed out to the dry stick of a woman behind the desk, I asked, indeed, I begged, could you tell me who placed this? Indeed, I could not, she rapped out an answer. Could not or would not? She seemed quite the virgin queen of her small realm, one who would know everything. I tried again. Might you tell me at least whether it was a man or a woman? If it was a woman, it had to be Mum. And as I thought this, my heart froze, for if it were so, I still did not know how to respond. But the old maid behind the desk snapped. I can tell you nothing. I offered a bribe. She reacted angrily. Still, I pleaded with her for several minutes longer. Only when she threatened to summon a constable did I leave the office. Very well, I had done my best. Although some invisible cook seemed to be mixing the very strange pudding of emotion in my chest. I was distraught that I had found out nothing. Or was I distraught that I had found out nothing? Or relieved? Yet in my thoughts I pushed Mum away for the time being. There was a much more pressing matter to be attended to. A deadly one. Thank you. Some hours later I entered the humble abode of the much bewildered Mrs. Tupper, who blinked several times when she saw me come in. Miss Michelle, she asked uncertainly, would you like some supper? No, thank you, Mrs. Tupper. I was in a great hurry to change into dark, inconspicuous clothing. I have no time. This fact did not improve my humor, for I felt as hollow as a drum, having missed luncheon as well. Eh? The old deaf soul placed her hearing trumpet to her ear. No! Thank you, Mrs. Tupper! For once, shouting was not a nuisance, but a relief to my feelings. My feet hurt abominably from slogging up and down Fleet Street, plus visiting 10, I had lost count, an inordinate number of borough offices without locating a single Kippersalt except one Augustus Kippersalt, who had been put away in Colony Hatch Lunatic Asylum. He could not possibly be my man. Altogether it had been a most trying day. My only hope then was, after all, to get back to Pertellity's by the time that much ruffled, oversized hen of a woman put her shutters up to see where she went. Limping upstairs to my room, I relieved my suffering feet of my uncomfortably fashionable boots. I snatched off my wig and sloughed off my dress, peach-colored taffeta interlaced with white baby ribbons, most unsuitable for concealment, then yanked a dark, commonplace woolen blouse and skirt out of my wardrobe to put on. I slipped my blistered feet into thick socks, then my blessedly comfortable old black boots. Having no time to wash the recondite emollients off my face, I smeared ashes from the hearth upon myself. Transformed thus into quite the commonplace Sally down the alley, I sheathed my longest dagger in the front of my corset, grabbed fur the rusty black shawl to throw over my head, and ran back downstairs, feeling rather than facing Mrs. Tupper's puzzled gaze as I bolted out the door. It's the end of chapter 11. You got told to leave a stream due to a pun you made today? That's awful. Five, 1, 2, 3, 4. No, I will not repeat that number for you, but I would be happy to let you see it. Right there. I felt like since it was in a paragraph, I had to read all those numbers. Chest pudding. Oh, wait, what? Alrighty, I'm gonna keep on going. Chapter the 12th. Cab! I yelled imperiously at the first opportunity. The driver, although no society prize himself, turned incredulously upon being hailed by an apparent woman of the slums. You're addressing me? I tossed him a golden coin, which instantly silenced his doubts and objections. The Strand at St. Mary's, I told him as I climbed in, that corner being close enough to Holywell Street. He must not know where I was actually going. And another sovereign if you can get me there in 10 minutes. Yes, ma'am. Plentiful cash at hand worked better than ravishing beauty to transform one's status under certain circumstances. I'm your man. Me and old conductor here will see you get there. As he whipped his wretched ewe-necked nag into a rapid trot, I tried not to think of anything I had ever read in Black Beauty, sitting back, bracing myself against the swaying of the conveyance, and disciplining myself to consider instead what lay ahead. I disliked rushing in such a headlong fashion into I knew not quite what, but I felt I must seize the moment, for in Pertellity's, that is to say, in Mrs. Kippersalt's anger, I sensed an opportunity that might not occur again. I was going to try to have to shadow her home, after all, because she would take her anger along with her when she went there. She would direct her ire at her husband. What have you done now? And I quite wanted, somehow, I did not yet know how, to hear the answer. Moreover, I needed to look at Mr. Kippersalt. I had spent a great deal of imagination upon Mr. Kippersalt, and seeing him would either support or disprove my hypotheses, which were: suppose that a man in war or in some unfortunate accident had his face maimed, including but not limited to his nose. Suppose that, in attempting to find ways to conceal the defects in his appearance, he became an expert in face putty, rubber features, and the like. Might he not open a shop specializing in these things, if only to obtain them readily for himself? Being quite an unprepossessing man, might he not, for the sake of housekeeping and so on, marry an exceedingly plain woman who had no other prospects? Perhaps an ambitious Cockney woman? Having wed him not for love, but for self-advancement, might this unusual woman improve herself to the extent that eventually she took over running the shop? Might he not resent being pushed aside? Resent it to such an extent that he did what? Avenged himself upon Dr. Watson? Whatever grudge could he possibly hold against Dr. Watson? But wait a moment. Perhaps he blamed Watson for the loss of his nose. Suppose it had happened during the Second Afghan War, in which Watson had served as an army surgeon. Perhaps Watson had amputated his wounded proboscis. Brilliant, I congratulated myself mentally, pleased and excited to have hit upon such a plausible connection. The speeding, swaying, veering cab in which I sat pulled to a jouncing halt at my destination. I burst out, before the wheels had quite come to rest, leaping into a full-tilt run as I threw the cabby a sovereign, even though I had no clock to tell me. Had he got me here quickly enough? He had. Panting, I poked my head around the corner of Holywell Street just in time to see Mrs. Kippersalt closing the last shutters to secure her shop for the night. Then she went back inside to fasten them. The last rays of daylight, blessed sunny light most uncommon in London, lingered on the pinked roofs of the crowded old buildings as I waited, watching the door, expecting it to open and her to emerge with a coat and hat, gloves and umbrella, to lock up and start homeward. Daylight turned to dusk, and I still waited. Mrs. Kippersalt had not come back out. Whatever in the world had become of her? Perhaps, oh goodness heavens, no. She had gone out a back way? Quite unlikely, for Holywell Street meandered along the edge of London's most dense, clotted rookery, tottering houses, shouldering one another, each containing a swarming nest of poverty-stricken inhabitants. Spaces, no indeed tunnels, for the upper stories closed together overhead. Passageways no wider than gutters separated these buildings from one another, unlighted and no cleaner than gutters either, with rats abounding as well as lower forms of human life. Inconceivable that Mrs. Kippersalt would venture alone into such a sewer above the ground, unless she looked forward to the attentions of Jack the Ripper or like-minded others. Inconceivable that she could have slipped away without my seeing her. Yet with each passing moment it seemed more and more evident that she had done so, and that I was a fool. And I called myself a Predatorian? No, I was a mere girl, more fit to cut out paper dolls. I despaired as dusk deepened into dark. Lamplight glowed from roofs up above, but it did not comfort me, serving only to cast me into deeper shadow, for these ancient buildings loomed like a sea-carved cliff, their upper stories jutting out over pavement, gables protruding, each floor with eaves and bay windows overhanging the one below, so that they seemed built upside down, larger at the top than at the bottom, and likely to crash down upon one at any moment. Like my little, struggling, self-made world. I tried to do things and find missing people, but to what effect? Here I stood in the dark, alone, cast aside by my own mother, feeling wretched enough to mew like a lost kitten. A glow of lamplight sprang to life in the first story over Pretellities. Light sprang to life in my mind, also, as it were. My melodramatic musings abruptly ceased. The next moment, abandoning misery along with concealment, I ran across the street, unpeopled now that the shop windows stood dark, and up the pavement to Pretellities. If that were she up in the room over the pavement, the room under which swung the sign carved in the shape of a rooster. If, as might very well be the case, why had I not thought of it before? She lived over her shop. I had to see. Quickly. Already they were quarreling. Yes, it was Pretellity in the upstairs room. I recognized her contralto voice. She and someone else were arguing vehemently. Through a partially opened window, I could hear their angry tones from where I stood, although I could not catch the words. I had to get closer. But how? I saw within a moment how to start, at least. Taking 3 quick strides to the shadowy, stinking gutter gap between Pretellities and the next shop, I yanked my skirt above my knees, and by pressing parts of my personage against the opposing walls, truly, I cannot with decency detail how I ascended the narrow space, except to say that up I went rather like a sweep inside a chimney. After the first 6 feet or so, I felt a small fear that anyone who might happen pass by would spy me, for who would look upwards to notice a girl in such an unlikely position? As my head neared the level of the gas-lit window, I could hear Pretellity more clearly. "You think I'm a fool? You're up to some mischief gadding about when my back's turned. I want to know what." "I told you, taking care of my own business." Wait a moment. The second voice, husky and low, sounded almost exactly like the first. 2 women. Who was the other? Where was Pretellity's husband? Pretellity scolded. "You got no business but to stay home and don't plant no more people." "I didn't plant nobody, just filled out some papers to put 'em where he put me. The place'll do for 'em." I heard a gasp of shock. Then Pretellity all but screamed, "You're mad as a adder! Me husband was right to have you put away." "But you made him get me out again, didn't you?" "Shut your wicked mouth, You made him get me out again," insisted the second woman, "because you can take care of me at home, 'ere. You'll always take care of me, won't you, sissy?" Something about the voice, not merely its peevish tone, but something as placable as time made the hairs prickle on the nape of my neck. I had reached the limits of my chimney, the point at which the building's walls joined together, and the window from which the voices issued remained above me and off to one side. I could hear, but I could not see. I had to see who was speaking, see who was so obstinately repeating. "You'll always take care of me," I said. "Answer me. I know you'll always take care of me." Like a horizontal wall between me and that window jutted the eaves that sheltered the pavement below. Quite hard, that pavement, most unrelenting to fall upon. Nevertheless, I took a deep breath, then I leaned out over the dark abyss, grasped the rounded wooden edge of the eaves with both hands and kicked away from my safety of my chimney, trying to swing myself upwards and onto the confounded obstacle. I succeeded in throwing one knee over. However, at the same time, one hand lost its grip. A knee I quickly discovered does not function as well as a hand under such circumstances. It slipped off. I had to exercise every iota of self-will not to scream. "You'll always take care of me, won't you, sister mine?" insisted the relentless contralto voice. "Say it! You'll always take care of me!" Would that someone might take care of me? Catching hold of the too smooth edge of the eaves again with my other hand, I hoisted myself with strength spurred by panic, and managed to get the upper portion of my personage over the top, then my lower limbs, then roll away from the edge. Panting, I found myself lying on a slantwise sort of ledge. "You'll always take care of me!" That fanatical voice went on sing-songing as I sprawled, gasping for breath, scared half out of my wits, and that voice added friction to my fear. Sorry, they split the words in these at the end of the paragraphs, and it's hard to read. Each word chilled me. Not only the tone, but the substance. Take care of me. Take care of me. It was in the heart of my heart what I had always wanted, of my family. "You'll always take care of me, won't you, sister mine? Say it! You'll always take care of me!" "Of course I will always take care of you," Fertility snapped finally. "I always have done, haven't I?" Triumphantly the other responded, "Not when you let the rats eat me face." That's the end of chapter 12. Oh, 8675309. There you go. That's a great number. Oh, be safe, Riddy. I'm sorry I missed you. Didn't get to tell you when you left. I know, it's like, good lord, just say it already. Oh, thank you, Tara. Appreciate it. I'm just gonna keep on going. Pressing on, pressing on. We've only got, 5 chapters left and an epilogue. Making a real good time in this book. I might have time to start the next one. Who knows? Oh, thank you. It's okay, you can clap late, Riddy. It's all good. Thank you, Tara. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys just being here and listening. It just makes it more fun being able to read to somebody that's actually there. So, thank you guys for being here and for supporting me. My little 2 viewers right now. I don't know if Heartless is still here. Maybe she left, but it says she's still here. But even if you're just listening, Heartless, I appreciate you being here too. So, thank you guys. I'm very glad to have you here and listening. So, I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. I think it's fun. So, alrighty. Chapter the 13th. Rats. Eat. Face. If she'd said it a moment earlier before I'd gained the ledge, I believe I would have lost my grip and fallen to nearly certain death on the pavement below. As it was, I flattened myself like a squirrel as the falcon flies overhead, my fingers clutching at the shingles and my thoughts clawing at an even more slippery slope. That was 40 years ago, Pertellity's weary voice. 42, complained the other, and in her ever-so-accurate spleen I recognized with revulsion something of myself. The way I was holding a grudge. Mother. Mum. I'd long ago forgiven her for going away, free spirit that she was. She had provided for me. We'd communicated by code in the personal columns of the newspapers. But 2 months ago, on one of the coldest days in January, feeling a bit desperate, I had asked her to come to London to meet me. How it hurt still that she had not even replied. "I was only 5 years old," responded Pertellity wearily. "I fell asleep." "And I was only a baby," retorted the other. "Helpless in the cradle, and you let the rats crawl on me and nibble me nose off. Stop it, Flora." But Flora's drone did not hesitate for so much as a syllable. "And me lips, and the better part of me cheeks. Stop it. And you were supposed to be watching me." Yes, she too wanted to be taken care of, living with her sister. How comforting it should have been. Sisters together. I'd never had a sister. Was I about to tell myself I'd always wanted a sister? Nonsense, Enola, you've never till this minute even thought of it. As for being taken care of, I had 2 brothers quite eager to take care of me by having me schooled in the social graces and rendered fit for matrimony, and I had a mother who had taken care of me by giving me freedom and the means to employ myself as I saw fit. Stop feeling sorry for yourself, Enola Holmes. You'll do quite well on your own. That inner voice, kind yet firm, it was my own. Yet it was as if Mum were still with me, in me, and in that moment quite willingly I forgave her for being the way she was. A weight flew away from my heart. Meanwhile, Flora was still complaining. You're my big sister, supposed to take care of me, and you're saying I didn't cry loud enough to awaken ye? Her lament sounded merely wearisome to me now, but even though Fertility must have heard it many, many times before, it affected her. For the love of God, Flora, stop! She flared with a pain in her voice. You're cruel! It's me who's missing a nose, sissy, not you. Nose. Oh my goodness. No longer flattened or trembling, I lifted my head, for I quite wanted to look at Flora. With my mind once again focused on the present circumstances, I realized that my brilliant theory of a soldier who'd had his nose amputated by Dr. Watson needed to be discarded, even though it was a man who had sent the bizarre bouquets. Or was it? I had to see whether Flora might pass as a man. Easing myself to my hands and knees, I crept, mentally excoriating my skirt, most difficult to crawl in, along the ledge as silently as I could towards the window. Fertility said, Ever since Ma died, I'd done my best for you. Very likely true. From my first acquaintance with Fertility, she'd seemed motherly to me. Evidently she'd taken the responsibilities of a mother at an early age. At the corner of the window I inched my head upwards until I could see, not much at first, lace curtains, but by leaning forward I could peer through them, albeit dimly. I could make out a drab and shabby chamber within, a sitting room, although neither sister occupied a chair, their passions had levitated them to their feet. Fertility stood with her back to me, fists on her ample hips, partly hiding Flora from my view. I could tell of Flora only that she was sturdy, like her sister, and plainly dressed in blouse and skirt, like Fertility again. Although I imagined Flora's face would similarly be large and plain, I could not see her features. And it was Fertility doing the ranting now. All my life since, always trying to make it up to you, she cried. Always! Got my husband into the business, looking for ways to make you presentable. You were just trying to marry me off and get rid of me. I were trying to make you happy, and a decent woman, but you had to go and put on a beard and trousers. Oh my, she was the sender of the bizarre bouquets. She had to be. In a fever to sit her face, I pressed close to the outside of the window's glass. Gadding along about doing the devil knows what? Fertility raged. I had to act the part of your husband now, didn't I? No, you didn't. You don't want to let him rest in peace. You're just wicked and full of hate. You try being hideous. Heavens, the afflicted woman pitied herself. She needed some starch. At least a man is allowed. Going against nature. How many times have I told you to stay home when I'm working? But now I hear you're up to your tricks still. I've half a mind to send you back to Colony. Atch myself. To Colony Hatch myself. Hatch with an H, but she doesn't say her H's. The other one screeched in rage, lunging at her sister, and I could see her face now, but I wished I couldn't, for she snatched off her nose with one hand and thrust it at Fertility, shaking it like a weapon as she screamed. You try it and see what happens! You just try it! With her other hand she ripped rags of concealing putty off her mouth and cheeks. Her face, or what was left of it, writhed like a mass of slugs. You'll be sorry! You and any doctor who signs an order for you! I barely comprehended what Flora was saying. So terribly did the sight of her unnerve me, to see instead of a face crawling flesh, instead of mouth and nose merest cavities. And her eyes, there was nothing wrong with her eyes except that I think they had forgotten how to weep, and murder glittered in their glare. The sight of those seer eyes affected me as much as the sight of her maimed face. I think I might have moved or made a sound, for her crazed gaze swung and caught me at the window like a great stupid fish drawn by a lighted torch to the surface of a nighttime lake. She screamed as if she were seeing a mass of writhing slugs, I suppose, and pointed at me. Just as Fertility swung around to look at me also, I ducked. One of the sisters, I know not which, shouted something quite shockingly unrepeatable. I fled, but on that narrow ledge I could not turn quickly, if at all, so I could not go back the way I had come. Instead I scooted forward around the corner of the building towards I know not what. Along the eaves like an oversized caterpillar I wobbled, trying to crawl, but hampered, indeed nearly thrown over the edge by my accursed skirt. I firmly believe that the whole reason women must wear long skirts is that so they are unable to do anything worthwhile. Behind me I heard the window wham open, and Pertellity, I think, bayed in a voice worthy of a whole pack of hounds, "Police! Help! Burglar! Police!" A constable's whistle shrilled from the street, summoning others of his ilk. Answering whistles sounded to the north, west, and east. From inside the building I heard the pounding of feet on stairs, going down. They expected me to run the same way, go down. Therefore I would not. I would go up. Easier said than done, with a skirt wrapped around my ankles and no light by which to see. But at the next corner my fumbling progress encountered a drain pipe, and I seized upon it with both hands, hauling myself skywards like a sailor swarming up a mast. Meanwhile, below me, neighbors took to the street. Police arrived in the hullabaloo, shouts, screams, whistles, clatter of hooves, and thud of running feet, frightened out of me such strength as I had not thought I possessed. I reached the top of the drainpipe only to be blocked by yet another beetling overhang of the cliff-like building, but somehow in my frenzy, like a cat when the mastiff threatens, I scrambled up and over it without hesitating, and encountered yet another wall. Would I never reach the refuge of the rooftops? For a moment, out of utter frustration, I beat against the ancient plaster with my hands, but that was a useless waste of time and effort. I turned away from the street and ran along the narrow eaves in the dark. Ran. I did not creep or crawl as I had so cautiously done a few moments before, nor, preferring to remain on my feet, did I edge or inch in any sane fashion such as would have been appropriate to the circumstances. I ran, unable to see upon what my feet were landing. Perhaps lunacy is contagious. With considerable force I banged into rough wood. I am afraid I muttered something quite naughty as the barrier, whatever it was, inflicted its presence upon my nose, which as usual had arrived where I was going ahead of the rest of me. My hands quite wanted to comfort the nose, but I made them instead explore the structure that thwarted me. It might have been the side of a bay window. Ours not to wonder why, ours but to do or die, into the valley of death charged. No, onto the rooftop of desperation climbed the idiot who ought to be thankful for possession of a nose, however protuberant. Onwards and upwards, Excelsior! Scrabbling to ascend the whatever it was, I clambered to its narrow top, and standing there took a deep and thankful breath, for I could see now, albeit dimly. And I could see imitations of sky freckled with stars. Intimations. I could see intimations of sky freckled with stars. And against it interruptions in the forms of peaks and chimney-pots. At last! One more mad scramble over one final confoundment of jutting eaves, I had achieved the roof. Panting, I let myself lapse into the steeply angled shingles lying flat. Safe. No one could possibly find me now. I would simply rest here until daybreak. But even as I thought it, in the street far below, a sergeantly voice bawled, "Wheel it around this side! Over here! How do you work the fool thing?" The next moment, the most extraordinary, blinding, bright white sword of a light stabbed the darkness, slashing it wide open and routing night into fleeting shadows. I had read in the newspapers, of course, about Scotland Yard's new electric searchlight, but reading is one thing, and being struck by such lightning is another. I am afraid I screamed aloud. However, so did everyone else in the world, or at least everyone else in the crowded street below, so I think no one heard me. "Tilt it up towards the roof!" "He's crazy," some other man announced. "No one could have climbed up there, much less a woman." But I did not stay to listen. Much shaken and feeling a trifle weak, I did not attempt to stand and run upon the steep rooftop. Instead, worming my way up the shingles, a most fortunate if unreasoning reaction, I realized afterwards that they might have spotted me otherwise. However thin I might be, I did not make a very good snake. Still, somehow I reached the peak of Pertellity's building and, hugging the housetop, slipped over it to the other side. That fearsome sword of illumination passed where I had just been. Safe on the shadowed side of the roof now, I watched it slice the night. No, not safe. Next they would wheel it around to this side. The thought, quite electric as the light, galvanized me. I must reach another building, and another, after that, and so make my escape. Springing to my feet, I ran across the steep slope of the roof towards the rear, away from that dreadful searchlight, so bright that even in the shadows I could somewhat see where I was going. There. This rooftop joined directly into another, not so steep. Gladly I sprang upon it. Crash! And I plummeted straight down, as if I had stepped off a ledge, into air. It's the end of chapter 13. Very true. Rats, squirrels, and falcons. Dang skirts, ruining everything. That's why I don't like wearing them. Walls do also ruin everything. Yes, lunacy is contagious. That's why we're all crazy. Much less. Thank you, thank you. I feel like I should take a bow after reading these chapters. Oh, you're making really good progress, you guys. I haven't even been going an hour. Done 3 chapters, it's not even been an hour. I feel like we're making great steam. Oh, thank you. Throw some roses. Oh, thank you. You're too much. You're too kind, darling. A plane just flew over. I don't know if you could hear it. I'm gonna pull my shade down so creepers can't creep in my bedroom. Because it's dark here. It is dark on the eastern seaboard. Getting stuff done. Heck yeah. My chair is not spun the right way. I'm like sitting crooked. Okay, there we go. Getting it done. Take some more water. Well, this isn't water. It's sparkling water. It's a good old... I'm not sponsored, but I got a good old mango LaCroix. It's one of my favorites, so, you know, if anybody wants to mail me a present, just mail me some LaCroix. Just kidding, don't do that. It's probably really expensive to ship. What's today's date? Is today the 16th? Yeah, it is. So, it's my random fact for the day, if you guys want to hear it. Japanese scientists have found a new way to handle the sewage problem in their country. They have found a way to turn the poop into meat. Who wants a turd burger? It's my daily fact. So, there you go. There's your little intermission before we press. Press onward. I saved the one from the 14th because I thought it was great. I'll read that one after the next chapter, so you guys will have a reason to stick around. Chapter the 14th. Amidst a cascading chorus, unmistakably the sound of broken glass, I plunged. Without my permission, my mouth opened to scream, but before it could do so, my benighted fall ended, whump, in something that cushioned the impact quite effectively. I landed on my feet, buckled to my knees, and stayed that way amidst... what? Some poofy, airy, springy substance like a giant bustle pad. Much harder to identify in total darkness than the glass showering around me with a muffled splashing sound. I tasted some salty, rather sticky liquid in my open mouth. Ordering the latter to close, I applied my sleeve to the former. Yes, it hurt a bit. Blood. A shard of glass had cut my face, evidently. I felt some similar cuts stinging so that I knew they could not be dangerously deep on my hands. All in all, however, it seemed to me that I had come off rather well. My bleeding, although upsetting, was not significant. The searchlight would not find me here. I had fallen, I realized with a pang of annoyance at myself for being so stupid, through the roof of Mr. Kippersalt's hothouse, which of course occupied the very top of the building. Mr. Kippersalt's. But Flora spoke as if he were dead. Moreover, if she were the origin of the bizarre bouquets, one must deduce that this was her hothouse. As these thoughts arranged themselves in my rather disordered mind, I stayed perfectly still, listening in case someone came running to see what the noise had been about. But I had heard nothing except my own pounding heart and panting breath, both gradually calming as if nothing alarming had happened. After a bit it seemed safe to think that my pursuers remained on the street, and had not heard breaking glass amidst the hubbub there. Well, being in a hothouse, I must have landed in a large plant, blessedly pliant. I could feel its stems bending under me. Not a giant bustle pad at all, although its spidery fronds around me itched and tickled like so much horsehair. Still listening for any danger approaching, I explored with my hands, finding nothing within arm's length, anywhere around me except more poofy vegetation. Quite large, this plant, whatever it was, brushing my face whilst my knees rested upon the potting soil in which it grew. Just as I realized I was now safe, comparatively speaking, my entire personage was seized by a fit of trembling that would not listen to reason, and I felt as if I could no longer remain upright. Allowing myself to slump to the ground, I burrowed between stems that gently yielded to me while the feathery fronds closed overhead. Stretched out at full length, still I found no end to what? Most perplexing, as if I had somehow fallen into a jungle. Wherever I was, I quite needed to rest for a few minutes, just a little while, until my fit of the shakes ceased, and I would get away. Quaking, I lay with both hands on my chest, that is to say on the hilt of my dagger, and closed my eyes. "Bloody blue blazes!" someone screamed. Or something of the sort. I think that's what she said. One hesitates to admit that one could have fallen asleep. Indeed, one almost wishes to say that one fainted, except that it could not possibly be true, as I never faint. In any event, I opened my eyes to find myself looking up at the wan light of dawn filtering greenly between a great many delicate fronds of simple enough to tell what it was now, that I could see it. I lay engulfed in bushes and bushes of asparagus. "My babies!" Some woman, presumably Flora, was shrieking. "My hawthorn! My trumpet flowers! My harebells! Glass everywhere and the cold wind gusting in!" While ashamed to confess that I'd let myself be taken so off guard, I can at least say that I retained the sense to lie utterly still, except that my fingers tightened around my dagger hilt, and made no sound. Meanwhile, footfalls pounded up a nearby staircase. "The villain!" continued the shrieker. "She broke in here! My hothouse!" "Flora, calm yourself," Pertellity's weary voice. "She's long gone." Would that it were so. "Who the hell is she?" Indeed, such was the profanity with which Flora spoke. "What's she want with us?" "I don't know." Pertellity excuse me. She sounded unsurprised. "I don't know." Pertellity sounded quite unsurprised at her sister's language, but grim as she added, "I wish I did know." "I'll kill her! I'll find her and I'll kill her, like I killed Flora!" The force of Pertellity's rebuke commanded a halt to such talk, and received it. "You are to kill no one ever again, do you hear me?" Flora muttered some sulky reply, inaudible to me. In heightened tones Pertellity demanded, "What was that?" "What have you done with Dr. Watson?" "Nothing. Who said I've done anything?" Flora whined like a child who, denied a tantrum, resorts to tears. Why you gotta bark at me after what happened to my outhouse?" "Oh, for the love of mercy, that's easily remedied. Send for the glazier." Pertellity sounded exhausted and disgusted. "You'd better not have anything to do with whatever happened to Dr. Watson. My breakfast is getting cold." The sound of heavy steps signaled her departure. "Thinks she can turn her back on me," Flora said, sniffling to her babies, I supposed. "Breakfast indeed. I'm not finished. I'm not—" I heard her thump off after her sister, slamming the hothouse door behind her. Leaving me hidden, yet trapped in a great deal of asparagus, where once again I started trembling. "Enola, this will not do." But the brusque, almost offhanded mention of killing, and of Dr. Watson— "Think about that later. Think of how to get out of here. Think now how to get out of here." My shaking increased. In order to calm myself, as I had done so often before, I closed my eyes and envisioned my mother's face. Of course she was saying, "Enola, you will do quite well on your own." Blessedly, the thought of her no longer hurt my heart, only warmed it, and stopped my quaking at once, so that I was able again to think clearly, to plan what to do. It was, after all, not so difficult. I merely sat up amidst the asparagus, removed my boots so that I would be able to walk silently in my stockinged feet, then got out of the asparagus, which grew in quite a massive 8-foot-long galvanized steel container, supported above the floor by several sawhorses. This I saw after I had climbed down and stepped softly away. I saw also the hole I had made in the roof by my involuntary entry, and broken glass scattered on asparagus, red hawthorn, white poppies. But I could not spare so much for the hothouse, because I found myself swaying on my feet. Understandably so, I realized. I had not eaten in 24 hours. And, reaching into my skirt pockets for the strengthening sugar candies I customarily carried with me, I found none. I had been in too much of a hurry and had forgotten them. Confound everything! I needed to make a quick escape before I keeled over. Carrying my boots, I padded, as silently as I could, in my wobbly condition, to the hothouse door, where I halted and listened. As I hoped, I could hear the two sisters' quarreling voices below. As long as they continued to berate one another, I would know where both were, and any servants would no doubt be busy eavesdropping. Although, on second thought, I doubted there were any servants. If Flora was all that she seemed to be, Portellity could not risk having "elp," lest someone find out too much. Very quietly I opened the hothouse door, then slipped out and down the stairs. In the front room somewhere, Flora was clamoring. "You'll always take care of me, won't you, Sissy? Answer me! You'll always take care of me!" Except the time the rats ate her face. Feeling very cold as well as very shaky, I crept down more back stairs, through an empty kitchen, out a back door, and then I ran, tottering, not caring that the stones bruised my feet or that I was fleeing into the worst thug rookery in London City. That's the end of chapter 14. I know, that is the biggest tragedy, not having candies. Aw, you would have stuck around even without a fact. Aw, I'm so touched. Well, if you're in a hothouse with nobody around, maybe you could just, yell about killing people. Oh, Summer's hosting me. Thanks for hosting, Summer. I don't know if you're here. Let's see. Yeah, the asparagus might snitch on you. That is very true. So, it's pretty wily stuff. I mean, did you see VeggieTales? Junior the asparagus? Just can't trust him. Especially in that episode with Larry Boy and the fib. He just fibs through the whole thing till his fib grows into a big ol' lie. You guys probably don't even know what that is, but that's okay. VeggieTales, look it up. Watch the old ones though, the new ones are not any good. I'm gonna keep going now. Oh! Here's my fact from 2 days ago. Fact. This is according to the 10 worst ways to die from How Stuff Works. If you ever have the bad luck to be hunted and captured by a hyena, it won't go through the trouble to knock you out to stop the struggle. It will simply begin eating you while you are completely conscious. There you go. I bet it laughs the whole time as well. I don't know. I don't remember there being any broccoli in VeggieTales. I think there were in like one of the first episodes, but I don't think I've seen that one. There's an asparagus, and there's tomato and a cucumber and a peach. That's not a vegetable, but he has hair. And peas and carrots and lima beans and Mr. Lunt, he's a nut. And yeah, I mean there's tons of veggies, all kinds of veggies. Scallions. Yeah. There's a lot of veggies in VeggieTales. Alrighty. Pressing on. We only got 3 more chapters and an epilogue. So off we go. Chapter the 15th. Quaintly enough, my dirty and disheveled appearance served to protect me in these low, swarming streets. Last night's drunkards groaned in the gutters. A girl in a grimy pinafore, and not much else, huddled in a doorway, her bare feet blue with cold. Boys in shabby shirts and trousers, enormously too big for them, rolled up like life preservers around their twiggy limbs, ran after a well-upholstered woman begging for pennies. Wives emptied slops. Flannel-vested workmen trudged about their business. A man with a pushcart shouted, "Ot buns, sausage, suey pudding, ot fat pudding for your breakfast." No one paid me any attention as I sat on the curb of the pavement to put my boots back on, or as I purchased from the street vendor an unspeakably vile sausage at which I gnawed while I limped along. Had the lovely Miss Everso minced into these brawling, thief-ridden streets, she would at once have been set upon, robbed, stripped of her fine clothing, and let go naked, if at all. But a frowsy-haired, wild-eyed, cut and bruised young woman, who looked as if she'd been in a fight, was not noticed whatsoever. When I arrived back at my lodging, however, the one on Dr. Watson's street, being a great deal closer at hand, matters were different. Luckily, the sharp-eyed landlady happened to be out, but I found it necessary to bribe the gawking young girl-of-all-work into silence with a shilling, and a promise of more should she tell her mistress only that I was unwell, and required my meals to be brought up to my room, and yet another shilling to provide me with a bath, but say nothing of it. Thus it was that, by early afternoon, fed, clean, decently clad in a posy print house dress, the cut on my face patched with sticking plaster, I paced my room, fretting. Bertellity's voice echoed within my mind. "Flora, you are to kill no one ever again. What have you done with Dr. Watson?" Dear heavens, I needed to find out. If I were to help Dr. Watson, if he were yet alive, I desperately needed to know more about Flora, her last name, whether she had ever really killed anyone, whether she had really been committed, and whether Dr. Watson had signed the order, giving her a motive to take revenge upon him. And I needed to find out the exact procedure for having a person put away. I knew that it required the signatures of a family member and a couple of medical doctors on some papers. With my various questions, I needed to go to the borough office, the police, the lunatic asylum, Colney Hatch itself, and investigate. But with a cut, however superficial on my face, I could not possibly go as the beautiful Miss Everso. Even the merest pimple would have kept such a lady in seclusion until it healed. Yet I had no other disguise available to me here, not even a full veil, and even if I had, it would have been of small help, for only the lovely Miss Everso, in my experience, could wheedle information out of officialdom. Until the scratch above my mouth healed, no matter how much I moved about my room, I could not run away from this inexorable fact. Until my face healed, or I found a suitable disguise for it, I could do nothing. I could not even leave my lodging when anyone might see me. Intolerable. What might happen to Dr. Watson in the meantime? What might already have happened to him? Confound everything! This will not do! Leave Watson to Flora's dubious mercies for even a day longer? I would never be able to face myself in the mirror again if I did so, yet I could see no other option except to communicate with my brother Sherlock. And the very thought threw me instantly into terror. The idea of going to see him was simply out of the question. Even supposing I sent him a message, he was so clever, how easily he might trace it back to me. To judge by the accounts I heard of Sherlock Holmes, anything, my choice of stationery, the color of my ink, something about my handwriting, a postman's fingerprint, any trifle might betray me to him. I simply could not risk it. Yet I had to. If I did nothing, and Dr. Watson died. "Piper, ma'am," came the timid voice, along with an equally timid knock at my door of the girl-of-all-work, whom I had just sent out for a Pall Mall Gazette. "Thank you. Just leave it on the stand, please." Once she had departed, I fetched the paper into my room, and, still pacing, I scanned it for further news of Dr. Watson. There was, of course, none. Impatiently, tossing the rest of the newspaper away, I turned next to the agony columns. As I rather expected, for it had appeared every day since the first time I had seen it, there I found once again 422-555-4151444423451, 334244542351544 5351, 3532513451, 35325143, 235325551, 55531-534, 3132345, 54411, 4354, 325-133-1533. Deciphered. Ivy, desire mistletoe, wear when, love your chrysanthemum. And still I did not know what to do. I knew my mother. She was simply not the love sort. She would not have sent for me. Yet how I wished she had. Especially now, when I was so worried about Dr. Watson. Mum would know what to do. I felt sure she would. If by the tiniest unlikely possibility this message had come from her, could I let the chance go by? If she had extended the hand of familial affection to me now, and if I did not respond, would she extend it ever again? Perhaps she intuited that I might be a trifle upset with her, and she wished to make amends. Yet my mother, where, when, surely Mum, being the one who had to travel to London from the gypsies, only knew where, would prefer herself to set the time and meeting place. Might it be that someone did not wish to make me suspicious by naming the wrong sort of place? While thoughts such as these ran through my mind, circled rather like a dog chasing its tail, my eyes went about their own business, scanning onwards into the agony columns, where nothing particularly demanded their scrutiny, until they happened upon a quite interesting and mysterious personal in all capital letters. Alone, part, alone. Unattributed and unsigned. Alone, part, alone. That was all. Here, I'll show it to you. I peered at it, bewildered, as I am sure a great many other readers were, by such an enigmatic, anonymous message in such bold print that one could not help but notice it. No cipher either. Plain English. Someone quite wanted to tell someone else something. But what? Part alone. Part from whom? And how otherwise than alone? No difficulty there for me. I was always alone. My very name spelled alone backwards. Then I saw. Enola, trap, Enola. I burst out laughing, enormously relieved. It was a cipher after all, so childishly simple that only a genius such as Mum could have placed it. Thanks to her, I now knew for sure that the Ivy Desire mistletoe message was a canard, undoubtedly originating from my dear brother Sherlock. And I now knew something far more important. My mother might not be motherly in any usual sense of the word, but she did care for me, in her way. Quite a difficult task, in her way. Quite a difficult task, that of assisting my brother to locate Dr. Watson, remained before me, but I felt more able to face it now. Envisioning my mother's face with warm affection, I calmed enough to sit down. Fortified in my resolve, I took a pencil and a sheaf of foolscap paper in hand. So, what did I need to communicate to my brother, and what could be left out? First of all, what exactly did I know as fact? With my paper in my lap, I scrawled. I know that Pertellity said, "What's he done now?" Or it could have been, "What's she done now?" sounding much the same, meaning the sister. I know that Pertellity speaks of her husband, Mr. Kippersalt, as alive, but Flora speaks of him as deceased. I know that Pertellity told Flora, "Don't plant no more people." What did Flora reply? Something about putting someone in a place that would do for him? Did she refer to Mr. Kippersalt, or did she refer to Dr. Watson? I know that Pertellity asked her, "What have you done with Dr. Watson?" I know that Flora dressed as a man, almost certainly, as it was she who sent the bizarre bouquets. I know that Pertellity told her not to kill anyone ever again. Did Flora kill Watson? A most upsetting question. In between jottings I doodled, and now I began to draw in earnest. While far from being an artist, I have a knack for drawing people's faces in an exaggerated sort of way, and I have found that doing so helps me think. I sketched Pertellity. What was her real name? Had she recognized me outside her window? More questions to which I had no way of finding answers. I drew Flora as a man, complete with nose and goatee, considering that she made a much more satisfactory man than a woman, and it was narrow-minded of Pertellity to think otherwise. But how had Flora come to adopt this disguise? Then I remembered and wrote. Flora, I said. Flora said, "I 'ad to act the part of your husband now, didn't I?" Pertellity said to let him rest in peace. Although suffering a certain degree of self-doubt since my theory of Watson and the noseless soldier had proved to be so badly mistaken, still I began to hypothesize what may have happened between Pertellity, Flora, and the missing Mr. Kippersalt. Although attempting to help his sister's wife at first, Mr. Kippersalt had eventually found Flora unbearable and had committed her to Colney Hatch. While I sat thinking, I drew Flora as a woman, putting features similar to Pertellity's on her. Pertellity, however, whose life had been devoted to Flora since the unfortunate incidents of the hungry rats, could not let her sister be locked up for a lunatic, even though Flora arguably was one. Forced to choose between her husband and her sister, she championed the latter, defied her husband, and had Flora released from the insane asylum. Flora then promptly killed Mr. Kippersalt. This event apparently had not broken Pertellity's heart. Brutality had helped to conceal the crime by pretending her husband was still alive. Meanwhile, she had tried to take control of her sister so no more such unfortunate events or incidents would occur. Flora apparently still intended to make trouble of some sort. Of course. Remembering another snippet of overheard conversation, I made a note. You'll be sorry, you and any doctor who signs an order for you. Flora still held a grudge against Dr. Watson, who had signed the order to have her put away. Surely I had hit upon the truth of the matter. But what had she done to him? Killed him? The thought sent a chill through me and a pang to my heart. I hesitated to accept it. Musing, I sketched Flora as I had seen her, nose and face putty torn off. But it was hard, painful, I mean, to depict her that way, poor woman. I imagined two Cockney children on their own in the most abject poverty while their mother scrubbed some more fortunate woman's floor. Or perhaps their mother was dead already. Or perhaps she had beaten and ceased to love the older child when she had come home to find the younger one's face eaten off by rats. Or perhaps she had ceased to love the disfigured one. Mother or no mother, growing up that way, so disfigured was enough to make anyone insane. Shuddering, I looked down at my drawing to find that in my sympathy, or perhaps in a sort of understanding beyond logic, I was turning Flora to flowers. I had given her a convolvulus mouth, an upside-down rosebud for a nose, and now I went on to give her poppies for eyes, and for her hair, asparagus fronds, of course, the wild and stringy. She made quite a bizarre bouquet. Ye gods in white nightgowns, I was back where I had started. All the flowers except the rose, which upside down symbolized the opposite of love, had been in the original bouquet I had seen in Mrs. Watson's parlor. And I understood all of them except the asparagus. What on earth was the meaning of asparagus? For the matter of that, why did Flora grow so very much asparagus in her hothouse? For bouquets? She had enough fronds for 1,000. To eat? She could have supplied all of Holywell Street, but I had seen no evidence that any spears had ever been cut. Spears. That might be it, I reflected. A spear, a stabbing weapon, hatred or death. Why, the name of the plant itself included the sentiment in a way. A spear-agus? A spear of Gus? I sat up straight with a cry, scattering papers left and right, for in that moment of blazing white electric searchlight illumination, I saw it all. I understood everything. Seemingly insurmountable difficulties fell away, and I knew exactly what to do. It's the end of chapter 15. Admiral Akbar is leaving clues. Vile sausages. Flora the Explorer. Heck yeah! I get so slipped up reading, it's like I don't stream at all. Yep, an upside-down rose is the opposite of love. Not love. What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. I don't have any more facts for you because I haven't... Well, I could go ahead and give you tomorrow's fact. Here's tomorrow's fact. A hippo can run faster than a man. That's it. That's all it says. Hippo can run faster than a man. The little comment under it, it has like comment, kind of like apples to apples. It says, and watching that fat lard pass you should be good motivation to go to the gym. Oh, sad. Alrighty. So that's tomorrow's. Jumped ahead there. Alright, moving on. Chapter the 16th. There would be no need, after all, to risk my freedom by writing a letter to my brother Sherlock. Instead, nearly giddy with excitement, I seized upon a fresh piece of paper and began to compose a communication of another sort. Several moments later, I finished thus. Oops, sorry. I'm trying to center it, but it's mirrored. There you go. And then she signs it E.H. I did not allow myself to hesitate over my bravado in signing this with my own initials. I dare say I resembled my brother Sherlock, not only nasally, but in other ways. It seemed that, like him, I needed to have my little moments of drama. And surprise, for which reason I have withheld from you, gentle reader, the sense of the above message at this time. And while I am sure you are capable of deciphering it, I hope you will refrain for the few remaining pages of this narrative. Once I had inked a final copy of my cipher, blotted it, folded it, and sealed it with wax, I considered how best to convey it to the Pall Mall Gazette, as soon as possible, so that it would appear in tomorrow's morning edition. I could not possibly trust this important errand to a street urchin, but a uniformed messenger boy or licensed commissionaire could be questioned and traced back to me. Eventually, rolling my eyes, I realized I was on my own, as usual, and rose to see about it. With a combination of pencil and a recondite emollient, I colored, has a U in it, like the British spelling. I colored the sticking plaster on my face to be, I hoped, less noticeable, at least after dark. I could not have attempted this undertaking in daylight, but at nightfall, in my rusty black dress and shawl, wearing my wig and my most wide-brimmed face-shadowing hat with a strip of veil attached for good measure, I ventured forth to Fleet Street. All went well. An indifferent night clerk, who hardly looked at me, took my money and my message, promising to send it straight along to the printing press. Good. But I knew that, if I returned to my lodging now, ordered supper like a sensible young lady, and prepared for slumber, I would not be able to sleep. I still felt electrified through and through with anticipatory excitement, plus worry about Dr. Watson. If he was where I deduced he would survive this one additional night, and all would be well. Over and over again I reviewed my reasoning with the same conclusion, yet I could not seem to find confidence in my own mental ability. What if I were overlooking something? What if I were mistaken? What if I were a stupid, blundering girl who should have run straight to the great Sherlock Holmes, a man of action, and let him handle everything? I could not bear to go back to my room and wait. Instead, emboldened by the dagger riding in my corset and feeling myself to be a sufficiently inconspicuous figure in the dark, I made my way back into the abominable little labyrinths of tenements crowded and huddled up together, to the perpetual exclusion of light and air, and the constant fostering of dirt, disease, and vice, the stifling courts, lanes, yards, and alleyways shouldering one another and cribbing and confining whole nests of poverty-stricken inhabitants, as the penny illustrated paper would have it, in other words, to the neighborhood behind Holywell Street, where that morning I had seen a girl wearing a pinafore with no dress under it, and her bare feet blue with cold. That was a lot of words. At this time of night, the street swarmed with half-drunken men and women, street vendors hawking cheap shellfish, or ginger beer, or sweets, and on every block a painted female selling something else. And beggars, entertainers, some would have preferred to be called. I stopped to watch a grubby man who had trained a rat to stand on its hind legs in his hand, whilst he plied a white handkerchief to make it represent in quick succession a Roman senator in a toga, an Anglican clergyman in an alb, then a white-whisked barrister, and with the addition of a second handkerchief, a lady being presented at court. He attracted a laughing crowd which dispersed like smoke the instant he pulled off his cap. I was the only one to give him a penny. Then I went off to find the children left behind, or left entirely, by their gin-seduced parents. It had been too long since I had ministered to the London's poor, not just days, but weeks. Finding ragged boys huddled together under an archway like puppies, lacking food to offer them, I gave each a shilling, then had to run away because they sprang up to alert every other little vagabond on the street. Had I not hidden myself, I would have been mobbed, my pockets ripped off. So it went throughout most of the night. Eventually I was able to locate the girl I most wanted to find, shivering in her pinafore, in the area where I had seen her before. Taking her to a used clothing store where I knocked up the proprietor, I supplied the girl with clothing, shoes, and stockings, as well as money for food. Dazed and suspicious, she gave no thanks, nor did I expect any. Blessed weariness and a certain inner peace were my reward. A few hours before dawn I returned to my lodging, at last ready for sleep. Or so I hoped. I suppose I did doze for a while, but daylight found me wide awake, dressing with care so as to be prepared for any contingency, money, dagger, bandaging, biscuits, sewing kit, pencil and paper, latchkeys, smelling salt, headscarf, spare stockings, in my bosom enhancer, plus a clean handkerchief, gloves, more money, and, I hoped never to forget again, some candies in my pockets. Despite my best efforts to be calm and efficient, I found myself in such a nervous state that I could barely touch the breakfast the girl brought up for me. Well before it was time, I hovered, wigged and hatted, but unable to sit, at the window from which I could view the Watson residence across the street. I watched the parlor maid come out with a bucket of soapy water, get down on her knees, and scrub the stone steps white, as she did every weekday morning. It was going to be a while. Sighing, I forced myself to sit down. With my fingertips, I played imaginary melodies upon the windowsill as if it were a piano. Or perhaps I should say imaginary disharmonies, for I have never taken a piano lesson in my life. The milkmaid passed as usual, but leading a donkey, not as usual. Someone on the street must be so ill as to require fresh, warm donkey milk. I studied the humble creature as if I had never seen such a long-eared animal before. After milkmaid and donkey had passed from sight, I drummed with my fingertips on the windowsill some more. The Watsons' family parlour-maid, who had long since finished scrubbing the steps, came out again to give similar attention to the window panes. The iceman's wagon trundled along the corner, drawn by a wise old nag, which stopped at each house on its own, whilst its master made deliveries. During the considerable length of time it took them to progress through the street, I watched with fullest attention to every detail, including the color of the horse. Not content today with grey or bay, I decided it was roan. The iceman and his grizzled nag disappeared from view. My fingers became tired of tapping and lay still. No longer in a state of fevered anticipation, but feeling a leaden ache of longing, I waited, and waited, and scarcely noticed at first the barouche that rattled in from the north, for I was expecting a cab. Idly I watched the carriage, which had its top down, as it rolled near, expecting that it might carry some elderly lady accompanied by a nurse, out for a daily airing. Now I could see the passengers. I shot to my feet and screamed with joy at the same time as I clapped both hands over my mouth as if my brother might hear me. Not to my astonishment, my brother Sherlock. Unmistakable with his top hat and monocle, his heavy gold watch chain draped across an ample expanse of silk waistcoat, it was my other brother, Mycroft. The one who did not trouble himself to look for me, only sat on his throne and gave orders. The one whose customary orbit of home, government office, and Diogenes club never varied. The one who could not be bothered. Or such had been my previous suppositions. Quite mistakenly. Evidently, Mycroft had tried to find me. He had come closer than Sherlock to mastering the floral code Mum and I used, and had come perilously close to understanding what would lure me in. For plainly, it was he who had placed in the Pall Mall Gazette the cipher reading, Ivy, desire, mistletoe, where, when, love your chrysanthemum. As evidenced by the fact that it was he who had responded to my reply. 54534111155, 435353343, 3153234351555, 3211543132, 114455231533, 114413, 125334, 3334, 13521451313444112354EH. And now, gentle reader, you shall know the meaning of this, if you have not already yourself deciphered it. Thus, arrange the alphabet into 5 lines of 5 letters each, excluding Z. In the cipher, the first 2 numbers refer to the 5th letter of the 4th line, T. Then, 5th letter of the 3rd line, O. 4th letter of the 1st line, D. 1st letter of the 1st line, A. 5th letter of the 5th line, Y. Today. In full. Today, noon. Colney Hatch, Asylum. Ask for Mr. Kippersalt. Signed, E.H. This was the summons Mycroft had read in this morning's edition of the Pall Mall Gazette, a summons he could hardly refuse, no matter how much it puzzled him. I could only imagine what happened when Mycroft had arrived at Colney Hatch, and Mr. Kippersalt had been brought forth. But obviously the imperious Mr. Holmes, either of my brothers quintessentially upper class and accustomed to being obeyed, could have filled that role. Mycroft had prevailed in liberating Mr. Kippersalt, for there on the other side of the barouche as it pulled up to the home sat, yes, Eureka, I had got it right. The other man was definitely Dr. Watson. The kindly physician himself, looking a bit less than jaunty, was understandable considering his recent ordeal, but plainly alive and whole, and widely smiling. The scene that followed could not have been more satisfactory to this observer. Alerted by the parlour-maid's scream as she saw who was in the open carriage approaching the house, Mrs. Watson hurtled out of the front door and dashed on flying feet down the steps As Dr. Watson rather shakily emerged from the barouche, his wife embraced him right there on the pavement. Even better, here came a hansom cab with horse most illegally at the gallop, and as the conveyance jolted to a halt, out of it sprang a tall, whip-thin man, who shook his old friend's hand again and again. Never have I seen my brother Sherlock happier. Grinning with delight, even as my heart ached, in a familiar bittersweet feeling, that of enjoying affection from afar, I watched until they all went inside. The cab and the barouche drove away, and it became apparent that the moment of drama was over. Then, still smiling, but with a sigh, I set about packing my bags. It was time for me to return to my room in the humbler but more distant and secure residence of Mrs. Tupper. That's the end of chapter 16. That is not a real thing. That's not a real thing. Dora the Explorer live action movie. There's no way that's not a real thing. That can't be a real thing. No, I don't believe it. I am not believing it. I am flying. Thank you. Alrighty, we just have one more chapter in the epilogue, and then we'll be done. All finished with this book. This is a good one. I think this one's... I enjoy this one very much. Alrighty. Chapter the 17th. In the next edition of the Pall Mall Gazette, I noticed the following in the personal advertisements. To E.H. Yours are the laurels. We humbly thank you. S.H. and M.H. What? How surprising, and how very gratifying. Comfortable in my old room at Mrs. Tupper's in a dressing gown with my feet propped up on a hassock, I read it again. To E.H. Yours are the laurels. We humbly thank you. S.H. and M.H. I felt quite a foolish smile take charge of my patched-up face as I enjoyed this most unexpected acknowledgment. Quite handsome of my brothers, I thought, to take any notice of me in the matter, which had been simple enough once I understood about the asparagus. A spear of Gus. Gus being short for Augustus. Who could be none other than Augustus Kippersalt. Upon first finding the name of Augustus Kippersalt in the borough record books, I had dismissed him from my mind as he had recently been sent to a lunatic asylum, and so I had thought at the time could not be the Mr. Kippersalt I was seeking. In a sense I had been correct, as the Mr. Kippersalt I was seeking no longer existed. But Bertelotti's husband had been Augustus Kippersalt, who, I realized, because of my interesting experience lying amidst a great deal of asparagus, and my even more interesting asparagus-related insight, did not reside in Colney Hatch at all. In fact, I would wager my nose that he was planted in quite an oversized hothouse box. I believed this so strongly that, a trifle regretfully, for I rather liked Bertelotti, I had sent to Inspector Lestrade of Scotland Yard an anonymous note detailing my suspicions, and suggesting that he might want to check into the matter. As to the murder of Augustus Kippersalt had been concealed, no death certificate had ever been filed, so as he was still legally alive, Mr. Kippersalt might be declared mad. How Flora had forged the paperwork I did not know, and might never know. Neither did I know how she, probably disguised as a man, had lured Dr. Watson out of his club, or upon what pretext she had arranged for the body-snatchers to put him away. But in essence it was obvious to me how she had taken her revenge. I put him where he put me, she had said, or something of the like to her sister while I listened from outside the window. The place will do for him. I imagine that being confined to Colney Hatch for any length of time might indeed have done for Dr. Watson, but I hoped that having spent only a week there he had come to no great harm. It was perhaps fortunate that I had cut my face, as this circumstance kept me from acting too soon, and thereby perhaps giving myself away. Not until nearly a fortnight later, well after Dr. Watson had resumed the routine of his medical practice, did the lovely Miss Everso once again pay a social call upon the gentle-hearted Mrs. Watson. With my recondite emollients subtly disguising my almost healed face, and with my little birthmark glued to my temple, with my wig in quite a stylish coif secured over my own incorrigible hair, and with the very latest in hats pinned to the front of the wig, I dare say I looked fetching, if not positively divine, in lace-trimmed buttercup and cream mousseline. For this occasion I carried a bouquet of primrose, apple blossom, and mignonette. Primrose for happiness yet to come, apple blossom for good health, and mignonette. I hoped Mary Morstan Watson would understand the mignonette as expressing my very high estimation of her. The mignonette itself is an unassuming little blossom, but it gives off the sweetest fragrance. It is a gift for a person of remarkable virtue, hidden by equally remarkable modesty. As I stood once more on her well-scrubbed doorstep and sent my calling card, Miss Viola Everso, I did not doubt that she would see me, but I wondered whether she would confide in me as before. My mission, you see, was to satisfy my curiosity, nothing more. Although, as it turned out, much, much more was in store for me. Miss Everso! As artless as a spray of mignonette in her meek taupe-at-home dress, she hurried to me with both hands extended in welcome. How very thoughtful, how very exceptional of you to call again, and what lovely flowers! She buried her face in their aroma before handing them over to the parlour-maid. Really, you are too kind. I beg to disagree. I believe you to be a woman who deserves every kindness. But I want for nothing now. My happiness is complete, I'm sure you know. John is back safe and sound. So I heard, with great relief, although not such, I imagine, as to match yours. Oh, I quite nearly fainted with joy when I saw him. Please, do sit down. Let me ring for some refreshment. I need not have worried about her reticence. She showed every indication of wishing to tell me the whole story. I needed only ask her in a general way, as we sipped tea and nibbled them in wafers, whether the police deserved any credit for her husband's safe return. Not at all. The police confessed themselves utterly at a loss in the matter. Mr. Sherlock Holmes, then? Even he remains confounded. We have no idea who the villain was. What happened, you see, is that a man John did not recognize at all came into his club asking for him, and told him that Mr. Sherlock Holmes most urgently requested his assistance in a matter of some delicacy. John says he became a bit suspicious when the messenger told him to leave his cards, his bag, and so forth behind Davenport, so as not to appear to be a medical man. It was an odd-looking fellow, you see, something wrong with his face, but still he seemed plausible, and of course Mr. Holmes has often summoned John on queer adventures. So off he went like a lamb to the slaughter, and no sooner had he followed his betrayer around the first corner than a constable and some other gentleman leapt out of a black carriage and seized him. Naturally he struggled against them and protested, "What are you doing? I cannot be delayed. I am on my way to meet Mr. Sherlock Holmes." Then the one with the odd face said, "You see how it is?" And the constable said, "Yes, indeed, classic monomania. Come along, Mr. Kippersalt." "Kippersalt?" I exclaimed, playing the part of one who knew nothing of the matter. "Have I not recently seen that name mentioned in the news?" "Yes, it was the name of that man who seems to have been murdered and buried in a hothouse." "Might there be a connection, I wonder?" "Mr. Holmes thinks so. He is looking into it. At any rate, these people in the black carriage thought John's name was Kippersalt. He told them, 'You're terribly mistaken. My name is Watson, Dr. John Watson.' But they continued to lay hands upon him, saying, 'Now, Mr. Kippersalt, come along quietly.' And when John insisted, a nurse appeared out of the carriage, saying, 'Do please calm yourself, Mr. Kippersalt,' and he felt the jab of a syringe. The next thing he knew, he was in the lunatic asylum, and no one would listen to him. The misunderstanding was quite enough to drive one mad, he says, if one were not deranged already." "How very clever," I murmured, now seeing how Flora had combined Kippersalt's name and Watson's fame to the downfall of the latter. "How very diabolical," I amended. "Diabolical indeed." The maid came in with my offering of flowers attractively presented in a green glass vase, placing it atop of the spinet. The fragrance of the mignonette filled the pleasant little parlour, much more pleasant without any bizarre bouquets in it. After the maid had departed, I asked, "Is it known who arranged this fiendishly legal abduction?" "We cannot yet say, but John thinks it was tit for tat by some insane person who he may have committed in his career. When he can spare time from his practice, he is studying his medical records for clues." "Who found him, then? Mr. Sherlock Holmes?" "Not at all." I quite expected her to then credit Mr. Mycroft Holmes, but instead she said, "The identity of John's rescuer is perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the entire affair. It seems—" For the first time Mrs. Watson hesitated, and I did not press her, for I felt myself to be on questionable ground, ethically. But with a little frown and a lift of her chin, Mrs. Watson leaned towards me. "I cannot think what possibly could be the harm in telling you, Miss Everso. Miss Enola Holmes was instrumental in returning my husband to me." "Miss Enola Holmes?" "Mr. Sherlock Holmes's younger sister." "Sister? I did not know he had a sister. The keen interest in my voice was not feigned, for in that moment I realized how very useful Mrs. Watson's disclosures could be to me. It is not generally known, she explained, for the girl is a worry to her family, very wilful and boyish, indeed to the extent that, well, her brothers do not exactly know where she is. I beg your pardon? Mrs. Watson then spoke at considerable length. I will spare the gentle reader her narration of how I had come to be on my own, hiding in London. What mattered to me was that her account tallied exactly with my own estimation of my brother's knowledge of me, with one enormously important exception, which I uncovered somewhat as follows. You have never met this extraordinary girl? I inquired. No, we have no idea how or why she involved herself in the matter. You have only just learned of her existence? Well, no, I did hear. You see, my husband confided in me. He had become so concerned about his friend's emotional state that he took it upon himself to contact Dr. Ragaston. Dr. Ragaston? I echoed with appropriate incomprehension. The so-called scientific Praetorian. Her tone carried as much scorn as her sweet voice was capable of conveying. A charlatan, John now thinks. Your husband learned nothing from this Dr. Ragaston? He never even saw the man. He dealt only with a young woman who served as secretary. I wonder whether that could be my friend, Marjorie Peabody, I murmured in absent-minded tones. Terrible what the decline in agriculture has done to the old landed families, you know. Majority has been forced to take position with some sort of doctor. Do you know Dr. Ragaston's secretary's name? I'm sorry to say I do not. I know nothing of her. Not even her appearance? Is she fair-haired and plump? I really cannot say. My husband barely spoke of her. He took no notice of her. My demeanor of Mrs. Watson told me these words of salvation remained, and I think and hope quite civilized as did my manner, as she continued to detail the mystery surrounding Enola Holmes and her role in the rescue of Dr. Watson. But all the while, as eventually the tale was told, and I arose, congratulated Mrs. Watson, embraced her with fervent good wishes, and departed, a perfect lady, during all of this, mind, like a dirty-faced child, leaped and shrieked, turned cartwheels, and displayed the most immodest handstands, whilst joyously yelling, "Hooray for the simple, good-hearted Dr. Watson!" A few weeks ago I had written on a list, "He, my brother Sherlock, knows I use the first name Ivy." One must assume that he now knows from Dr. Watson that a young woman named Ivy Michelle worked for the world's first and only scientific Praetorian. But from what Mrs. Watson had just said, one must assume nothing of the sort. Unless, could she have been coached to say this to entrap me? No, I felt sure not. It was simply not logically possible, for no one could have ever known or expected I would be visiting in whatever guise. Moreover, Mrs. Watson's observations had the ring of truth about them, the tender forbearance of a wife towards a somewhat obtuse and absent-minded husband. As I walked away from Dr. Watson's residence, mentally I invoked blessings upon his kindly and rather dense head forever. Heaven loved the man. He attached no importance to Miss Michelle. He failed to remember her last name, let alone her first. And such being the case, even if he had confessed to Sherlock Holmes concerning his visit to that charlatan Dr. Ragaston, he had not told my brother anything of Ivy Michelle. Hence great happiness to me. I could be Ivy Michelle again. I could continue to pursue my life's calling. Necessarily I restrained myself from skipping rather than walking at a well-bred pace as I trod the very respectable pavements of Oxford Street. And some day, after I had come of age, and could no longer legally be sent hither and yon against my will, some day, nearly 7 long years away, but nevertheless worth dreaming upon, some day I would pursue that calling under my own name. Enola Holmes, the world's first and only real private consulting scientific Praetorian. That's the end of chapter 17. Oh, stop. Stop. Those are great handstands. I saw them and I thought they were fantastic handstands, really. So, just take that. Alright, just going to read the epilogue. April, 1889. Flora Harris, says the great detective. Mr. Sherlock Holmes, to his friends and colleague, Dr. Watson, as they relax after an excellent dinner at the Simpsons in Strand, or heiress, I suppose I ought to say, as she is eminently qualified to place in the ranks of those born within the sound of the bells of Mary LeBeau. Mary LeBeau. I don't know what that means. Only a little slow to follow, Watson nodded. Only a little slow to follow, Watson nods. Cockney, you mean? Precisely. Flora Harris and her sister Frances, 5 years older. Flora did not marry. Frances, however, married above her station. She and her husband started a shop in Holywell Street, Chanticleer's. Frances took it into her head to start calling herself Pertellity. Clever, Watson remarks, admiring a handsome Havana cigar he intends to enjoy in a few minutes. But a bit irregular. The entire family seems to have been more than a bit irregular, as you've discovered to your discomfiture. I have? I can't say I recognize anything you've told me so far. The older sister's husband's name was Augustus Kippersalt. Ah! Watson drops his cigar upon the tablecloth and does not bother to retrieve it. His wife's younger sister resided with him. A bit of an odd arrangement, I should say. Augustus Kippersalt eventually had her put away on the basis of a George Sandism. Watson sits up straight for a moment of mental illumination and excitement. I remember now. It was not just that the woman dressed like a man. There were a variety of unsettling indications that she ought to be separated from the body public so as not to infect it, an unhealthy relationship between the sisters, an accidental facial disfigurement concerning which the younger was bitter to the point of monomania. Oh, Flora Harris is a madwoman, right enough. No one is challenging your diagnosis, Doctor. So are you saying it was she who... Was she the man who came and fetched me from my club? Dr. Watson's incredulity had grown by the moment. Yes, indeed. And she who gave you that nasty week in Colney Hatch. Holmes goes on to explain how Mrs. Pertellity Kippersalt, herself also perhaps a bit mad, had chosen her sister over the husband, releasing the former from the asylum at the expense of the latter's life. The murder had apparently upset the older sister, who had kept a tight rein on the younger ones for a long time after. But eventually Pertellity Kippersalt's vigilance had lessened, and Flora Harris had managed to orchestrate her revenge upon the doctor who had signed her commitment papers. But it's also absurdly simple, says Watson placidly, once more at ease in his chair when everything has been explained to him. Now, in retrospect, yes, but at the time... A very strange expression ghosts across the great detective's face. As if for comfort, Sherlock Holmes produces a pipe and tobacco pouch from an inner pocket of his cutaway jacket. At the time, he admits in a low, strained voice, it simply never occurred to me. All's well that ends well. In your goodness of heart, you do not reproach me, my dear Watson, but I reproach myself for neglecting an obvious avenue of inquiry. You would be in Colney Hatch still if it were not for my sister. Although fully aware that Watson knows of his sister's existence, they had, after all, both been present the night Enola, in a nun's black garb, had burst into Watson's house with a half-killed lady who required the doctor's care. Although there has been more than sufficient opportunity, this is the first time the great detective has willingly mentioned her to his close friend Watson. As the touchy topic is introduced, the good doctor is careful not to react, not even to blink. Ah, your sister, he says, as if he and Holmes converse about Enola as routinely as they mention Holmes' monograph on the identification of different types of cigar ashes. What do you make of your sister, Holmes? There is a silence which extends for several moments as the great detective stares, focused on nothing within the gentleman's saloon at Simpson's, his expression most difficult to read. I think, he says at last, that it is a great pity she will not trust in me. And that is the end of this book. That is the end, ladies and gents. Thank you so much for being here and for watching. Thank you, Lorain, Ohio Public Library, for withdrawing this book from your collection and selling it on eBay so that I could buy it and read it. This is the original cover of this book, so that's why I bought it, because I wanted the original covers. So these are the covers that I remember when I read these books when they were originally released. Alrighty, guys. Oh, thank you. I feel like I need to take a bunch of bows for this standing ovation. So, thank you guys so much for being here. Thanks for listening. Thank you for supporting me in my stream. Anybody that watches this on YouTube, thank you for listening and watching. I hope that you guys enjoy these books as much as I do. I will go ahead and show you the next book in the series is Enola Holmes and the Case of the Peculiar Pink Fan. Apologize for the glare on the video. The Case of the Peculiar Pink Fan. This is brought to you by the Westport Public Library in Westport, Connecticut. So this is the next book I will be reading in this series. I'm not sure when, so unfortunately I don't have a time nailed down for you. Probably, if I had to guess, probably Tuesday, August 21st, I will be streaming this one. If I, just kind of as a little throw out there, I might, Tuesdays might be good days for me to stream, so I'm hoping to get through the rest of these books. There are 3 more books in this series, 6 total books. I'd like to finish them. It sounds like a really long way away, but I would like to finish this series by the end of the year. So, I mean, I'm making good time so far, but like I said, school is starting for me next week, so I might have less time than I anticipate. But, so, if you're available next Tuesday, August 21st, 21st, please feel free, pop in, stick around. If you want to, if you haven't, just for YouTube viewers, or if you're watching the replay of this, if you want to catch up on all my other books, the first 2 books in the series are on my YouTube link, and the chapter layouts are all broken out for you, so you can kind of follow along and find your place. So, anyways, thank you guys for being here. I appreciate it. I hope you guys have a great night. Have a good weekend. Getting started for the weekend. Please be safe. Be smart. And I will leave you with a little bit of music. And I will catch you guys next time. Thank you so much.